Episode number 131 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Hello there to my amazing listeners. I first of all want to say thank you guys because some of you guys have reached out and had just amazing words of encouragement, positive words, and also beautiful stories of how your lives have been impacted. And really, to me, it's such a gift to hear from you guys. And over the years, I've actually responded and connected with some of my listeners and have had great connections and relationships with some of you guys that I've worked with. So it's just such an honor to be doing this kind of work. I really, really enjoy it. And as a matter of fact, I had one person who she's going to recognize herself now because we have been working together and she's been talking to me about, we had a conversation about identifications and how easy it is to create identifications or to identify as a certain way or thing or a label, especially when going through any kind of challenge, especially the fertility journey. And so basically, when I spoke to my client, I said, that would be a great thing to talk about. And actually something that I feel is really important is to talk about identifications. And what I mean by that is when you identify with something, it becomes almost like you. Being a meditator for many years, I've realized that when you meditate, you start to become aware of your thoughts and you realize that your thoughts are not you. So what happens is typically without realizing when we're not conscious is that we identify with our thoughts. And part of that identification is what the ego is. And you become that, and that's why sometimes when you have an opinion, you will fight to the death, so to speak, to be right because you feel like it's you. It's actually you, and you don't want to let go of that, and you don't feel like it's just an opinion. You become it. So our minds are very amazing, and our minds can take us, and they're very powerful. They could really convince us or feel that they become something because they're so, so powerful. But once we tame that beautiful, strong, powerful mind, we become more aware and it becomes less about something being personal. And then you can really use the power of your mind. So today I want to talk about how important it is to realize that you are beyond any label you're given. You are so much more transcendent than that. Us as humans, I feel so passionately about the fact that we are so much more powerful than we realize. I can't state that enough. We are so powerful. We have no idea just how powerful. Scientists are just beginning to discover how powerful we are. Yet we're so powerful that not even science can show us just how powerful we are. And I believe that's because we can probably shift and change and manifest even science, even what the laws of nature are, because we are really, really, really powerful as humans. So a lot of times we do have certain people that we put on a pedestal, an authority kind of energy, and they do study things for a long time, like doctors or people in our life, like parents or older siblings or people that we really look up to. And sometimes from that, maybe give us suggestions or opinions, and sometimes those can be putting us in a label, or it can have like a diagnosis, or well-meaning relatives can say, oh, you're being too sensitive. I'm going to give you that as an example. Or they can label your journey and not really understand what it means to go through the fertility journey and what it means to go through fertility challenges. And so sometimes we tend to know that it's not really true, and sometimes we may internalize it. And most importantly, the most important person really that can give us a label is ourselves. And so that's the most powerful, is when we really accept a certain label about ourselves or identify with our challenges and our struggles. We begin to feel like it's really part of us, or we are it. And so that's not a wrong thing. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a very normal thing. But over time, it can keep us bound to a certain future, because when, for example, a kid starts playing basketball and he loves it, he really enjoys it, and he plays it, and he's really good, and the parents see that he's really good, and you decide to put him in a team with a coach, and the coach happens to be a little tough. Basically, they can kind of point out a weakness that they have, and then the kid internalizes it and starts to become more aware of it. And so, and identifies with it, like, oh, I'm just weak at this. And then that can tend to repeat, because we agree in our minds to take on a certain truth. And really, that's what identifications become. They become our truth. Now, that's why they say there's no absolute truth. There's truths. So multiple truths. Everybody can have a different truth. So it's important to realize, how am I identifying myself? What am I labeling myself as? And when you're going through the fertility journey, it could be, I feel broken. I know a lot of people have said this, and this is why I'm using that as an example. I've had people come to me when I first met them, and that's what they would say. They say, I feel broken. I feel like I'm not working. I feel shame. So there are a lot of things that a person starts to internalize through the difficulties and the challenges of the journey, and make conclusions based on. Now, of course, if you look back throughout your life, you can ask yourself, what have I labeled myself that I no longer do? And I can almost guarantee that every single person listening to this right now has had a moment in their life where they label themselves a certain way, and then eventually overcome that label, and now no longer labels themselves that way. But looking back at the time that you did label yourself a certain way, didn't it feel so true? Didn't it feel so solid and certain? At the time you really feel that way. And then over time you overcome and you learn and you realize your actual worth, and then you move past the label. Most identifications are mind made. So it's something that you make your mind about. It's something that you actually have more choice over than you might realize. And just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true. So it's something that you've made your mind about. And these conclusions that a person can make are not necessarily based in truth. They could be based on experiences. They could be based on what they feel is logic, because, they can make a conclusion based on what doctors have said or what they've read. So those are things that could definitely keep us within a certain, box, in a sense, of the label. So who are we really, and why are we beyond labels? We as humans are so powerful. I have seen miracles happen. I guess they're considered miracles, but I think that there is always a potential for people to have done as well as I've seen them do, despite the odds and despite being given a really, really limiting prognosis. So I've had people that were told they cannot get pregnant with their own eggs, even through IVF, and I've seen them get pregnant naturally. Now, is that something that happens to everybody? No, but it just goes to show that some people that are in authority positions, they just don't know the future. They might be really amazing at what they do. They might be very experienced. They might know everything fertility backwards and forwards, but nobody, and I mean nobody, including you, can predict the future. Nobody can predict the future. So the beautiful thing about this life that we live in is that there's so many different possibilities and so many things to happen. Now, I understand that nobody wants to have false hope either. And I don't believe in just blindly going through anything. It is really important to go to doctors. I often suggest go and get multiple opinions and figure things out. Really give yourself that due diligence to figure things out, get the labs, get the tests, and really sort it out. Ask a bunch of different doctors their opinions. A lot of times you can get either free consultations, or at least we can get virtual consultations. So it helps out with time-wise because of everything that's happening right now and everything being virtual. So you might as well take advantage of it and get a bunch of different opinions. I think with something so important such as fertility and starting a family, you can't get enough opinions. You really need to empower yourself and get as many people on your team as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to pick every single person. And actually, you may end up finding who you really resonate with more so by finding or speaking to a bunch of different people. So this is really important. So by doing that, you'll start to get many different opinions and you'll realize just how many opinions people have. And that will make you realize that there's many different perspectives so that you don't really conclude anything about yourself and your fertility health. So it's really important to at least be open to get different opinions, to get different perspectives, and also get knowledge. So regardless of what I'm saying right now, as far as figuring things out and how you see yourself, I always believe that knowledge is key. You really want to understand what's going on. You want to get labs, you want to talk to doctors, you want to get a bunch of opinions. You really want to educate yourself or get clarity on what you need to do next. I've talked about connecting with your intuition. I feel really strongly about the fact that we are all born with that wisdom. And we've all been there. Again, like we've all been there where something's happened, we didn't listen to our intuition, we regretted it, or there have been times where you just felt something tell you or move you in a certain way and you don't really quite know what it is, but that is your intuition. We all have it. Animals have it. It's an instinct. It's a sense that we haven't studied, and we don't have to have everything in the textbook or in science in order to know that it exists. Sometimes it's just a matter of feeling and knowing, and that's okay too. We don't need to prove every single thing. I think it's important because if we prove every single thing, or if we need to prove every single thing, we're going to cut ourselves off from things that haven't been proven yet. And even scientists try to figure things out, and a lot of times it starts out with a hunch. And that hunch is intuition. Whatever anybody wants to call it, intuition is real, in my opinion at least. So who are you? You are a powerful being and you're able to transcend labels. Labels are man-made, they're mind-made, and they're not something that they're actually something that you can choose. So you can actually benefit from having labels in some ways. As long as it actually accelerates your growth and gives you more power. So you can empower yourself with labels. You can say, I'm a very loving person, or take something that actually empowers you. I'm smart. I can handle anything. I'm strong. So you can actually empower yourself by focusing on those labels that strengthen you and that help you and that fuel you. And as we know, being in the fertility journey, it's extremely draining. It's draining on so many different levels. It's draining financially, it's draining emotionally, it's draining energetically, physically, in so many different ways. And so you actually need to spend time thinking about, how do I fill that cup? I need to fill more fuel than even I did before all of this started. I need more fuel now because I'm expending more fuel. And so it's important to identify with things that are going to benefit you. And we get to choose. We can choose what we want to identify with. And that is the power of being human. And it's important because nobody would really choose to identify with a label that's disempowering. I mean, people do it, but it's most of the time it happens because people really do believe it. But again, it's not based in absolute truth. So how do you overcome it? Sometimes just sitting down and journaling, asking yourself the question, what is it that I'm labeling myself? Like, how do I really feel about myself? How do I really feel about my journey? How do I feel like it's going to end up? What do I really believe that my body can do? Do I believe in my body? Do I believe that I'm able to overcome this? And so just sitting down and asking yourself those questions is extremely cathartic, because you're able to just ask yourself, give yourself the attention, give yourself the validation of your emotions at this point. And it's not about invalidating the label that you're feeling. It's actually validating the emotions that you're feeling right now, and just sitting with it and recognizing it, recognizing what label am I feeling? What am I identifying with? Because ultimately, we're not what happens to us. I mean, that's the truth. That's really based in truth. We're not what happens to us. It's not our fault. It's not something that we chose. It's something that happened. But that doesn't necessarily get to define us. It doesn't need to define us. So it's something to think about, to really understand that you're so much more powerful than what has happened to you. And that not only that, like when you identify with something that's limiting, you're more likely to limit yourself. So, it's not, and I know that sometimes like when you become aware that you're stressed, you kind of get stressed about being stressed. And I've talked about this with Jill Blakeway, and it could be, that's a thing. Sometimes you can feel stressed about being stressed. So it's not really about being perfect. It's not about criticizing oneself for having mislabels or labels that are not accurate. So it's just about becoming aware. And once we become aware, then we can become more free. And it's ultimately, once we become free, we become more empowered. And so we get to the point one step after the next until we have choice, until we recognize the choice that we have. And once we realize that we do have some choice, because a lot of it is out of our hands, it's not something that we have choice about, then at least we have some choice. And that is something that is empowering, knowing that there is some choice in this journey. So when you find out what label you may have been identifying with, you can actually go ahead and question that label. I've heard about this as a little practice tool that Robin Birkin has actually mentioned. I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or if it was on a summit, but she said, sometimes we can have our minds criticize us, and that's pretty much how we label ourselves. We kind of criticize ourselves, or we label ourselves in a way that's disempowering. And so rather than trying to stop it, we can actually talk back to it. It's a little technique that she's mentioned, and I think that it's really smart. Just question it. Question the label. Question the identification. Is this really true? Am I really broken? Is it really, really based in truth? And even though you might have resistance in the beginning, you keep asking yourself, is this really, really based in truth? And ultimately, it won't hold. It won't hold because it's not, you just know that it's not really based in truth. So sometimes it's important to question our thoughts, our identifications, because ultimately it's going to hold you back. And right now you're at a point where you need all the energy you can get. It's something that is scarce, and it's something that you're expending. So you need all the energy and empowerment you can get. And it's okay to allow yourself to have that. It's okay to allow yourself to have that power and to regain it and to claim that power back. And so Our power gets given away with authority figures. It gets given away by reading too much information, horrible news about what another person went through. It gets taken away by our fears. It gets taken away by so many things. And so it's important to, when you can and when you can afford to, take that power back and claim that power. So this is something that I've actually seen happen over and over again in this journey. And a lot of times it does happen from feedback, misinformation, misdiagnosis, you name it. And therefore use the identification or some conclusion, because sometimes it's easier to have an answer, even if it's not a good answer, but to have an answer than no answer. So that is a lot of times why people would rather have a diagnosis than no diagnosis at all. And because getting the unexplained infertility diagnosis could be one of the most frustrating diagnoses ever. So this is something that at least getting something makes people feel like, okay, I at least have something now I can work with. So I understand how that can be, and how having something like that can actually feel beneficial. Even though it's not positive, it can feel beneficial. So acknowledging that is really important as well, because then you realize why you hold on to certain labels. Sometimes they simplify things, they make it easier. But even though they're easier, it doesn't necessarily make them empowering either. Just like any habits, really. And it could be a habit, and it kind of lies beneath the surface. So it is something that we tend to do, every single one of us, and not just on the fertility journey. We do it all the time. So I thought it was just an interesting topic to go over, to really take a look at, and not necessarily change, just become aware. Are you identifying with something that's not truly based in truth? Are you identifying with something that is actually limiting your journey? Is it empowering you to identify with that? Just really asking yourself those questions, I personally feel is very, very liberating, because the more we are aware, the more the light of our consciousness can help illuminate what is happening in our life. And the more we are illuminated, the more empowered we become. Awareness to me is really empowerment. And that's why meditation is so powerful, because when we meditate, we really are increasing our awareness, our mindfulness. And that's why it's called mindfulness meditation. One of the things with mindfulness is there's two things. There's concentrating on the breath, and there's and being aware and becoming mindful of what's happening, of our minds chattering or worrying or planning, and going back to the breath. So the concentration and also the mindfulness where we catch ourselves. So it actually increases awareness over time. And the whole practice of meditation actually increases awareness. And the more aware we become, the whole idea of it really, Buddha was the one that brought Vipassana, which is mindfulness meditation, into the world. And the idea of it is the more mindful you become, the more illuminated and awake you can become. And the more awake you become, the more liberated we become from our own thoughts. And many times those thoughts are limiting. They limit us. And that's why we don't feel liberated. They keep us in a box. And over time, when you become more aware and you become more mindful, you actually start to realize your true nature. And that's what awaken means, really, is understand or to see your true nature. And that is a vast nature that is not meant to be put in a box. It is way more special, vast, and powerful than something that should be kept into a labeled box. So I really believe in you. I believe in us as humans, and I believe that we have so much potential. And the more we label ourselves, the more we keep ourselves smaller. And so my goal, really, and I know that this is a fertility podcast, and I know that I'm speaking to many people going on the fertility journey. And I know that it's a very difficult journey and that it's got so many twists and turns and it's not linear at all. There isn't one way to do it for sure. But my intention really here is to reflect to you that you are powerful and that you can handle so much more than you may realize. And not that you should handle it or not that you deserve to handle it. Absolutely not. But I still want to reflect to you just how beautifully powerful you really are. So with that, I am sending you lots of positivity, lots of love, and lots of empowerment and lots of baby dust. Really praying for you guys to finally be able to start your family, because I know, it's something so innate that all of us want, and we want to have that joy, and we want to be able to give that joy to a child. So sending you guys lots of love, lots of light. And I also want to invite you guys to email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. And if you have any topics that you'd like me to talk about on the podcast, please send it to me. It is fun sometimes just speaking randomly. I love doing interviews. I love having conversations, but I know, and I've been actually asked to speak about certain things. And some of my guests have said, I really love listening to you talk about certain topics. And so this kind of randomly came up because it was something that I noticed. And in talking with my client, it was something that a lot of people tend to have thrown at them through the fertility journey and then tend to adopt or self-adopt or kind of identify with. So I thought it was a really important topic to talk about. And again, I'm so open to hearing any ideas or things that you guys are curious about that you'd like me to talk about on the podcast. I love hearing from you guys. Please don't hesitate or assume that my inbox is so crazy that I can't get to respond. I respond to every single email that I get. I may not respond right away because it does take me time, but I will respond. So feel free to send me an email if you have some topic that you really, really want me to discuss. So thank you so much for listening in today, and I hope you have an amazing day. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.